I love you, but be so for real. You're one click, one bad breakup, or identity crisis away from being in the next Netflix cult documentary. And I mean that. Seriously. Before we get into it, like, subscribe, follow at I Love You But Podcasts on Instagram, TikTok, wherever you hear or watch your podcasts. You should watch it because I think I'm kind of cute, right? Anyway, solo episode, very different for me. I know I normally have a lovely guest that does all the talking and I just ask some questions to make me sound smart, but I wanted to recap. This season, we've been talking about cults and communities and the fine line between the two. Who gets stuck in a cult? Why do people join cults? Do people even join cults? What's the definition of a cult? How do people end up being a cult leader? Why do they stay? And based on all my researches, conversations, documentaries I've watched, I'm going to sum it up here for y'all. Because I know you're one click, one small thing away from getting caught up into that, and I don't want that to be you. So, who is facing this kind of thing? Who gets manipulated? Who gets pulled into these cults? What do these people look like? Guess what? They're everyday people. They look like you and me. The person, we all know the archetype of the person who leads a cult, right? The charismatic leader, they're confident, usually male. I know we have some female ones out there too. Often appealing to people who crave structure or belonging. And then the who of who gets into these cults is, it's people who are disconnected from their intuition. They outsource their sense of self to authority, a man, institutions. We saw that when I talked with a domestic violence survivor, Kathy, who now teaches women how to get back into their intuition. So if you are constantly trained to think you don't have the right answers, or your urges, your impulses, your natural human way of being is incorrect, you're going to start to doubt that inner voice that you have within yourself, right? Then once you're disconnected from that, well, how do you make decisions? Someone has to tell you how to make those decisions. Now you're vulnerable. Also, a whole other rabbit hole that we could go down, but like that feeds into the patriarchy, right? When women and also when people in general are disconnected from their sense of self, their intuition, they then need to follow into a system of order to create order and structure in their life. What is the most available system of order? The patriarchy, and in the US at least, capitalism, right? So we're going to fall into those systems and serve those whether we meant to or not. Who else? Moms who are exhausted, isolated, desperate for support. Moms who have kids with special needs. In general, being a mom, especially being a mom in America, is hard. Whether you work, whether you are a stay-at-home mom, it doesn't really matter. It's hard to be a mom here. We don't have support in the ways that we should. We don't have true community in the fact of, like, in a lot of other countries, you have a kid and your whole family is there to support you in one way or another. You might have an uncle that picks up the kid from school. You might have an aunt that does some cooking. Grandma watches after school, whatever the case may be. We don't have that same source of built-in family and community here, and we're so focused on the nuclear family of you have the wife, the husband, and 2 kids, or 2 husbands, 2 wives, whatever you want to say. It's the nuclear family, and we're all focused on just this inner part, and then you end up getting overwhelmed, exhausted, especially as a mother who you're the first person that your kids are going to go to when they have an issue, just instinctually. So moms, especially with kids of special needs, as we talked with a behavioral analyst this season, Milan, they will try to go to support groups or they will put their kids in some sort of like behavioral therapy, which is not wrong, but in that time, that may be the only hour that that mom gets to herself, to breathe, to scroll on her phone, to eat a meal by herself. And in that hour, she's going to keep sending that kid because she's like, okay, I'm doing something good for my kid. But they may be getting exploited. They don't know necessarily what may be happening in those rooms. They also may join autism support groups, autism parents support groups, and end up getting put at the bottom of like an autism mom hierarchy that I just learned about. So in any type of situation where people are marginalized, they're seeking safety, identity, any type of tradition, they're craving guidance, they are susceptible. In craving guidance, we talked with a Straitway Truth Ministries survivor who her husband got pulled into it through being an ex-athlete, an ex-military. They crave structure. They have structure in whatever their profession is, or however they got to school, if they only made it to like college athletics. But then after that, where's the guidance on how to have a healthy relationship, how to raise a kid, how to show up for your wife, especially in the US where we go to college away from our families, and we might not have them in close relativity to understand or learn from them. Or maybe I know like in a lot of Black families, we didn't have a good example. So anyone, like this season really taught me the who behind who was really actually in cults, who's escaping cults. It's not that cults target weak people. I'm putting that in quotes for our listeners, but they target people who are trying. They target people who are looking, searching for a way to be good, to be faithful, to be responsible, loving, or healed. They aren't just targeting someone who's, oh, I'm weak, I'm lazy. And I think that's just a common misconception of like, oh, it could never be me. But if you've ever been someone who was struggling, if you've ever been someone looking for community or support or learning, you are susceptible. So that's really the who. Now the what. We talked a lot about how oftentimes communities can turn cult-like. So you may be joining a support group, you may be joining a church, going to Bible studies, or even thinking about like the Pilates bodies mommies. Some of them was looking a little bit culty. Not saying if you do Pilates, you in a cult. I like heated Pilates. Shout out this place in Chicago. I like Onyx, Black owned hot Pilates classes. So I'm not hating on the Pilates, but when you make it your whole personality and there's a certain like, you have to pay this money or you have to do this or that to participate, then now we're starting to cross the line from like community to cult, because now we're restricting who can. There's an insider versus an outsider. But one of the big pillars of what makes a community turn into a cult is the control of information. So, for example, we talked with a Jehovah's Witness escapee. She was born into being a Jehovah's Witness, and she spoke about how they have a magazine called Watchtower, and they're told by their leaders that this Watchtower magazine is equivalent to them earning a college education. So they're not supposed to look at any other magazines. They're not really supposed to seek higher education. They go to school, but grades are not the focus, right? So anything that they want to learn, they're told it should come from one of their 2 Watchtower magazines that come out monthly. And that is equal to a college education. So they're controlling what kind of information they can hear. Even when it comes down to watching TV, back when we had cable and commercials, I mean, I guess cable still exists. Does anybody who's listening still have cable? Please let me know, like, what is that experience like? I haven't had cable in like a decade, literally. But anyway, even back in those times where there was cable and there's no curse words, and if someone curses, it's bleeped out. If they even had something they were watching where it's a bleep, they had to skip it. They had to just turn the whole program off. So if I was watching something and I was learning a different perspective or anything, as soon as there's like a bleep, it has to be turned off. That's a very effective way to control what people are hearing and information, because how would they ever really watch TV if anytime there's even like a hint of someone may have cursed, you have to change the channel? In Straitway Truth Ministries, they controlled information by having teachings only from the pastor. The kids are not even going to school, right? They're living on a compound in whatever location that they're in the country, and the women aren't allowed to like go learn how to actually be midwives. They learn through experience of delivering people's babies at the compound. So they're not able to say like, oh, so since we put all of our community money into a pot, let's go, I don't know, take this certification on being a midwife. No, that's a way to control information, because they don't even want you to like meet people in your class or talk to your teacher and get an inkling of like, or validation that something's not right in what's going on in your community. And then with like purity culture, speaking with Sarah Ford, who grew up in that purity culture in Alabama, it's like the obsession with virginity. But I know we've talked about this time and time again, but people are going to have sex, and you have to educate them on what happens when you do have sex, or what can happen, or the dangers, or your feelings, emotions. When might one be ready to have sex? How do you know? But instead, there's the control of information of, we don't talk about it. It's just, you need to be obsessed with being pure, being innocent. And not just in the way of sex, but also just everything about you. Pureness in how you dress. Pureness in how you speak, how you show up, manners. And at the end, it's helping to keep you in this same box of control. And then like control through like your identity is a big one, because you start to identify with this community, whatever community you're in. And if you're not abiding by those standards that are set by this community, I'm saying that in quotes, then there may be the fear of being left out, or that you'll lose your identity if you stand up against it. So some key patterns, belonging becomes conditional. Communities turn dangerous when they decide like who you're allowed to be connected to and the information that you're allowed to have access to. Even if it's subliminal of like, oh, well, we just don't encourage you to get this education because my Watchtower magazine is it's the same thing as going to college. So any type of subliminal thing that creates you having a distance from learning from other people outside of the practice, community, religion, whatever, that's probably a cult. Now, the big one that I feel like we talk about, I never felt right. Let's say financial control. So I never felt right when I would go to church. So growing up, I didn't really have to go to church every single Sunday for the most part. There were phases where we went most Sundays, but it wasn't always consistent. But as I turned into being a teenager, my parents gave me the option of, do I want to go to church with them that Sunday? Or at that point, it was like I would go with my dad. And sometimes I would say yes, because I'm just always a curious person. I'm always open to learning and seeing how I feel about something. And I remember I went to a Baptist church on Easter, and I was probably about like 15. And the whole ceremony, sermon, the whole sermon was geared towards tithing. And there was a whole production put on with drums and whatever instruments and singing and dancing. There was a whole big production. Great. Loved it. But it was all centered on putting money in that gold tithing pot thingy thing. I feel like any black person who's been to a Baptist church knows exactly the little gold bowl thing I'm talking about. Like, you see it in your head. And they had multiple of those across the room, and they had people whose jobs it was to collect the money throughout this whole performance that they were putting on, reenacting, I guess, probably like Jesus being resurrected. That's what Easter is, right? So, like, I went there from a true, pure place of learning and connecting with my Creator, to learning about Jesus, trying to read spots in the Bible. Honestly, in that sermon, he didn't even really tell me, like, oh, this is where I'm reading from when I read this. Like, I was, like, ready to open my book up, read along, and it was never about that. It was about making me feel compelled and moved to give my money into this pot. And I even shared with my dad, and he thankfully was someone who supported me in being able to express how I felt about it. And I remember sharing with him at our brunch, because, what's a Sunday church day if you don't go to IHOP, how I felt about that. So financial control is big and it's overlooked. So, like, with the Baptist church, it's not as bad. Well, I can't say that because I know there's these mega churches, and they make millions of dollars. And they'll be telling people to close them doors if they don't be putting money in that pot. But I think that's step one. That's not the worst that I've heard, right? So with the Jehovah's Witnesses, Angie told me that if you leave, you're going to lose access to resources and networks that help you with housing and childcare, but you most likely didn't go to college. So if you don't have those resources, how are you going to get a job that's going to pay for those types of things that you're leaving behind if you leave the organization? In purity culture, like evangelist households down south, like in Alabama, women's economic futures are tied to marriage. They're tied to marriage and the idea of, I've been pure enough, I've been holy enough to be worthy of a man, and I am economically dependent on this man's financial leadership. So if you want to leave, even if you don't want to leave your man, but you want to leave the church or whatever the case may be, how would you do that if your whole future is tied to marrying a man that's going to financially take care of you? Have you built the skills to be able to leave, even if you did go to college? Were you taking that seriously? Did you get work experience? And then I think, like, with that same thing ties into the patriarchy of the financial dependence on a man that you have when you kind of take away your autonomy and give it all up to a man is feeding into the patriarchy, because women lose power. And then I know with, like, autism moms, like, a lot of times the ABA therapy is positive, as we heard from Milan, the behavior analyst in training, but it doesn't mean that it has to be hundreds and thousands of dollars that are spent on it, and paid programs and memberships, prices and fees to join a Facebook group of autism mom support groups. And then I think the most alarming and shocking case of financial control that I learned this season was in Straitway Truth Ministries, where Coach Wade Thurna's, her husband was working for free for a $700,000 revenue a year personal training, coaching business for athletes that a lot of them may have become professional athletes. And instead of getting paid, he would get an allowance of whatever they felt was necessary for him to pay for food for their 5 going on 6 kids and his wife. There was no financial records or transparency. It was a one-pot system, and it looks like it's communal on paper, but it actually is exploitative. And then the people who weren't working for free, when they got their checks, would hand them over to the pastor, to whatever, the pot, and they would write down a list of, these are my expenses, so this is how much money I would like back out of that to pay for my expenses. Okay? So, how are you going to save money? You don't have a credit score because you're not supposed to participate in the governments. So because you're not supposed to participate in the governments, you don't have access to certain government things. Some people in this cult their kids didn't have birth certificates, right? So when Thurna and her husband decided to leave when she was pregnant with her 6th kid, they were leaving with nothing because all of their labor, all of their work, everything was was free, and they had nothing to show for it, even though the business that her husband worked for was basically $1 million business. So financial control is a huge one, whether it's direct, like in the case of Straitway Truth Ministries, or if it's indirect, like Jehovah's Witnesses, who are like, oh, well, you don't have to go to college because we have college right here for you. So yeah. Now, where are these cults? Are they just in middle America? Are they just in poor neighborhoods? Where? How would we find one? Where would we start one? If I want to start a cult, you know what? We could start a cult together, right? So if I'm going to say like, okay, where are we going to go? We going online, okay? And this is why. It's not just in the compounds anymore. We got more access to people now with the algorithm. The algorithm is the more extreme that I make my whatever content, the more the algorithm is going to push it, especially if it's divisive, especially if it feeds into like keeping you on and keeping you addicted. And I'm going to start with a little video that's like, don't we believe that everyone deserves an equal chance at having food and water and racial equity and clean homes? And don't we all deserve that? Don't we all deserve to feel safe? And look what this country is doing. And again, this is online. This is my YouTube video, right? This is online. It's some podcasts, all the things, right? Social media, Instagram. And I'm like, look, that's just what I believe. I have my guests. I have my diverse guests. I have women, men, Black, Asian, Hispanic, and we all want the same thing. And look at what this government is doing. They are taking that away from us. They are robbing us of that, right? And I start with that, and slowly my content gets more and more extreme, and the algorithm feeds progressively more and more extreme content that I have. So the cult is online. It's digital, baby. We starting this I'm trying to curse less. At least on the cameras. We starting this ish online, y'all. Okay? So we like thought that it's all in communes, but no, it start online. Then they get you to go where they want you to go, away from your family, away from your friends. They separate you in your mind before they separate you physically. And how do they separate you in your mind before they separate you physically? The internet, the algorithm. Okay. They also go, I learned from my therapist, shout out my therapist, that they be going to college campuses and they be putting their little buildings by them, and they'll be like, okay, yeah, we're going to pay for y'all to come and have free food every Saturday. I don't know about y'all, but in college, my ass was broke. I was a brokey, and I would have been on that bus. I would have been on that bus like, yeah, girl, let's go get this free food. I'm broke as hell, and I'm getting me a to-go plate, foil, Tupperware, all that. And I would have been there every Saturday thinking, oh, all I'm doing is going to get this free food. Whole time, these people is indoctrinating me to be in a little cult. That's the shit that happens. So they just put in Chicago a Scientology building right by some different colleges in the South Loop, and they purposely put it there on purpose so that they can get people that are in, so where is either online or people who are in a new stage of their life or learning or whatever the case may be, they needing guidance. So I'm either going to go near a college campus, but I really still feel like the easiest one is online, and I can get the college people online because all I got to do is get me a college person that's going to be one of my advocates and get the other college people into it, right? Cut them off some free food. So the commune people, we think like, oh yeah, it's only going to happen if you're in an isolated part of the country or this or that. No, that comes after. It's a progression, okay? So that's the where. Now, when in your life would you be the most vulnerable? Who am I targeting in this when? In this cult that we're going to start together, that I just decided that we're going to start, just for shits and giggles. So, after major transitions, so you graduate high school, you graduate college, you tried to go to the NFL, you was in college football, you realize you ain't going, you go to the NFL, but you know your career only going to be a certain amount of time. You spent all your life, I don't know, preparing for that moment, all your life preparing for games, day in and day out. What happens after that? I don't know. I need some help. People were postpartum, new mommies, struggling, breakups. You move to a new city, you don't know nobody, grief. That's when I'm going to target you. I don't know which one I would focus on for our little cult that we starting. I think, like, which one would I be best at? I feel like I think I would be best at either breakups or new cities, because I've moved cities multiple times and I've lived in New York. So it's like, oh, I went and I lived in New York and I had my little depression for a little bit, because I feel like everybody has to have a depression when they first moved to New York at some point. And you either work it out or you don't. And yeah, I feel like I could speak to that and, twist it. And then, yeah, breakups. Yeah, I just know about that because I've been having my little boyfriends. So thankfully now I'm not. Now I'm engaged. But you know what I mean? Like, I feel like I could speak to those things the best. That would be my target personally. But it's really just like when your identity is in flux, when you're trying to figure out who you are, what you believe, when you're seeking support, like a young couple trying to build a life away from home. Every guest really taught me the same lesson in a different way. It's like cults don't really prey on broken people, like people that's broken beyond help. They prey on people who are transitioning and are willing to, seek guidance in that transition. So, why? Why do smart people, because I want to emphasize, like we talked about the who above, it's not like people who are uneducated all the time. It's not people who aren't smart or worthy or whatever the case may be. A lot of times it's very smart people or very people who are trying. So why would they stay if they're so grounded, if they're in college or if they're taking their classes, whatever the case may be? So I don't know how familiar we all are with cognitive dissonance, but I love to throw out that I minored in psychology. And cognitive dissonance is when you have basically, if I was to break it down into like a situation, so you start working out to run a 5K and you've been running every 3 days a week for 5 weeks, and the race is in 2 weeks. But then you hear some information about the 5K of like, oh, well, if you participate, actually the people who started this 5K stand for XYZ thing that you don't believe in. But at this point, I done prepared for weeks, 3 days a week running. My fat ass could barely run around the corner before I started preparing. I'm not going to not participate, right? Like, I'm going on that run. I'm doing that 5K. I don't care what them people who's doing that 5K believe in. I'm running. So that's the idea of cognitive dissonance of like, once you've cognitively given so much of yourself to something, you're going to come up with reasons as to why you should keep going. Then there's like the social pressure and shame of if you leave, you lose your community. So when I was speaking with Thurna, who escaped Straitway Truth Ministries with her husband, her kids lost all their friends, right? They weren't in regular school. They were living with them. And they even speak about like, hey, mom, like, what if we see this person in the grocery store? And as a mother, you don't want to cause any harm in your kid's life. You never want to be like, I ripped them away from this group. So that might make you more hesitant to stay, or even just with yourself of like you're everyone you know, your whole community, everyone you love is in this cult. What do I do next? I'm going to be ashamed. I'm going to be shamed. Thurna was getting bullied online. Me and my lovely editor, Prevail, was looking, and she's getting bullied online. Comments from people who were in the community with her that were supposed to be like her sisters, saying horrible paragraphs and paragraphs of things to her because she left and decided to share her story. And even in sharing her story, if you go back and listen to that episode, she did not hesitate to say the positive things that she learned from being in Straitway, of like how it started with herbal remedies. And she said she even witnessed people who came in with whatever chronic condition, and some of them came out healed. So to hear how she still can acknowledge the positives and people are attacking her on the internet, it's like you don't want to leave because you don't want to face that same thing. It's like, and it's from people who you loved, who you thought were like your family. And then there's spiritual gaslighting. Have you ever been to a church sermon or whatever? I've only really been to churches pretty much, but like a church sermon and they're like, that's the devil. Like the light went out. Oh my God, the devil is in the room. It's like, no, not everything is the devil. Not everything is the devil, baby. So it's like that spiritual gaslighting of doubt is the devil, because anything that you say or think that's against the religion, they want you to think that it's an evil outside force inserting itself in you and your brain, and you have to fight against it. So some people truly believe like my doubt or my wanting to leave or my questioning, that is just the devil trying to take me away from what is right. And then the financial dependency and exhaustion that we spoke about of, if I've been working for the free 99 and I don't got nothing to show for it, where I'm going to go? I can't even get a credit card to pay for nothing. Where I'm going to go? I might as well just stay my ass right here, do the little teachings, do the little readings, because what the fuck else I'm going to do? And then the deeper why. Familiarity and a feeling of safety. It feels safer than to face starting over. When I talked with Angie from an ex-Jehovah's Witness, she was saying she had a client who she was trying to help escape, and it was so debilitating and gave her so much anxiety, this client, of leaving, that she was having panic attacks over making the smallest decisions because she didn't feel safe without them telling her every single thing to do. So really, people stay because it's so scary and unsafe to leave. Unsafe mentally, sometimes unsafe physically. It can feel like a death of your identity, a death of the community that you built, the stability that you had, or the purpose that you had in life. If you built all your life around this one purpose that you felt was good and true, it's really scary to leave that behind. But on the bright side, people do leave and people do escape. So how do they do it? The first thing, and y'all know this is my favorite thing to do, you ask questions and you ask them again and again, right? If you're asking questions and you're getting turned down, try to look it up. If you have a phone, if you're an adult and you can try to find answers to your questions, right? We got ChatGPT right now. I know ChatGPT ain't always right, but she be giving me some good stuff. Build your financial independence, even if it's on the low. Don't be like flipping your money out on your arm like, yeah, I got money, but maybe you get a little job on the side that they don't know about. Maybe you have an account that people don't know about. Maybe, I don't even know if I would trust a stash, depending on where and who these people are that you're trying to escape. But build some sort of financial independence. Get your education in whatever way that you can get it. It could be Coursera. What's the other thing? Skillshare. They have like free month trials. Like, learn something. Reclaim your autonomy through like movement, rest, and relearn what healthy looks like for you. Now, there's also a lot of resources, because I know I haven't personally escaped a cult, and I'm very much synthesizing and summarizing what I've learned from other people's stories, and it's not my own story. So there's like books called Take Back Your Life, When Religion Hurts You. There's like a cultish podcast. I haven't listened to it because I like to come up with like my own. I like to ask people questions and come up with my own takeaways, and I don't like my takeaways to be influenced by other people's content. But I know that's out there, and there's different therapy networks. And then also from Angie, I learned about the BITE model, BITE. And that's like how you would know if you're in a high control organization or a cult. So looking and learning about that model just so that you're aware, or if you are trying to escape, you kind of know what were the different ways that you were taken advantage of, because that will help you leave. My big takeaway on the how is like everyone that I talked with still has a certain level of faith, and they started by reconnecting to their original faith from within and building a new community. You don't just say, because I joined a community and it did this to me, I will never have community again. Or because I had a faith and it turned into this, I won't have it again. Every single person I talked with has redefined it for themselves for the better. I really hope that I gave even a little bit of justice to all the stories that I've heard and the things that women coming on the season, because we've had all women. Snaps for that. We love it. But I really hope that I gave it justice, and I'd love to hear if you have a story of where you were in a high control situation, or if you're still in one. Feel free to comment, DM, and definitely like, subscribe, and follow for more content like this. Go listen to the other episodes in this season to hear it from the horse's mouth instead of me, the middleman. But yeah, like, subscribe, follow. I Love You But Podcast, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, all the places. And stay tuned for more content like this. Bye, friends.